Well, Dr. Nandipha Magudumana is planning to appeal today's judgment, and I'm joined now by her lawyer, Machini Motloung. Mr. Motloung, thank you so much for joining us. It's so interesting what the judge had to say. He's actually basically disagreed with what the Home Affairs Minister said. He believes it was, in fact, an extradition. But because your client agreed to go home and said she wanted to go home, therefore, he said that he overturned the application. Talk to me about on what ground you're planning to appeal.
Thanks for having me. Indeed, we received instructions from our client to launch an appeal against the decision of the High Court of Free State, which was handed down this morning. In the main, having listened attentively to the judgment and the reasons thereto, we are of the view that another court will definitely arrive at a different decision, particularly based on this point, which we, in our view, find it to be quite bizarre that, she could be perceived to have consented to an illegal conduct or unlawful act. It is actually on those bases that we have the firm view that this judgment is appealable.
So am I correct in understanding then that you're not going to be, even though the judge did find this was in fact an extradition, you're not going to focus on that, you're going to actually focus on the issue of her so-called consent to come back to South Africa? I was speaking to Gary Eisenberg about this a little earlier, and he was saying to me that there are cases where so-called consent can be questioned, that it can be seen as a forced consent. Am I right then in my understanding that that's going to be the major focus of your appeal?
No, definitely. That will be the major focus. Look, the judgment in as far as really, confirming that the so-called deportation was indeed a disguised extradition. And that on its own, says a lot in terms of even if the applicant, is viewed to have have consented to an unlawful act, which is really, unheard of. I mean, how do you consent to an unlawful act? And look, we're going to drill down into the issues, particularly around this consent, and it should really pass the constitutional muster in terms of could it be correct to conclude that a person in the position of the applicant could have waived her right to succumb to an unlawful act and agree, to be flown back to South Africa? In our view, this is really a sticky point in the higher judgment, and it's something that really we have to. I mean, there's a host of authorities that we relied on, because this is a point that we hotly debated and fiercely argued in court, and for the judgment to go against the applicant on this very point. It's something that really will be one of the major factors in prosecuting our appeal.
Surely, wouldn't it further your case to accept that she'd been deported? And I ask that because if you're deported, you essentially, my understanding, and you'll come in with a legal focus on this, if you're deported, you're basically booted out of the country because you're not legally meant to be there. So wouldn't it actually further your point to say, yes, she was deported, but deported illegally?
Look, whichever way you look at it, there's elements of illegality, written all over the transportation of our client from Tanzania to South Africa, whichever way you look at it. But look, the point of departure here is that the sixth respondent, has been really, the case around, or their defense has always been that this was a genuine case of deportation, And remember, the plus events principle is quite clear in terms of how we approach the case. So we approach the case on the basis of what the respondent was saying. And if what they were saying is found to even be incorrect in law, it is incorrect that the applicant was deported, and this was an extradition in disguise, and to solicit a consent, not even informing the applicant of the consequences of such consent, not even to go further to inform the applicant of the fact that whatever she was consenting to is illegal in any event,
Right. Yeah.
And so those are legal debates that will ensue, and that would feature mainly in our. Yes.
Yeah, so as you've explained, you're going to focus on this whole issue of her consenting to go home. So you're going to launch this attempt to appeal. If you win, what does that mean for her? I mean, obviously she would be then released here in South Africa, but I presume she'd still face all the other charges of, charges of desecrating a body, of collusion, aiding and abetting a criminal, that sort of thing. Just explain what the potential ramifications are of winning on appeal.
Look, without really saying much about it, all that we're focusing on currently is the processes and procedures that were followed in, transporting her from Tanzania to South Africa, which we viewed to be unlawful. And what then comes out of that, there's a whole range of authorities that you're going to work on in terms of how we move towards really declaring the.
I get it. When are your talk us briefly through the timelines? My understanding is you have to apply for leave to appeal. Is that correct? And talk to me about how quickly this matter might come to a conclusion.
Look, we have to expedite this. It concerns the right to liberty, and it, inherently such right. I mean, such is urgent in nature and character. So the team is working around the clock. It's all hands on deck to ensure that we expeditiously launch leave to appeal, an application for leave to appeal, and we take it from there. We are awaiting the written judgment, and we'll be transcribing the record and deal with all other ancillary processes that will ensure that we deal with this matter with the necessary.
A little earlier this afternoon, there was this absolutely shocking story that the head of organised crime unit in the Free State has died. Sources have indicated to eNCA, to our reporter Stendelo Masikane, that in fact he took his own life in the police station after today's court decision. I mean, it's just such a bizarre case. We don't have a lot of details, but potentially, how could the death of a lead investigator in this case impact issues for your client?
Now, look, it's really sad, and condolences goes out to his family for their loss. But I'm not really in a position to offer a comment in terms of what the ramification would be. Other than that, the state as dominant it is, would have to really work around and whatever that they have to do in the absence of the leading investigator, as a result of his demise. But I would say that, from the defense side, there's nothing much that we can do about it. At the moment, our focus is really in ensuring that we assert our client's right, as alluded to in the High Court application, and our focus is more on, dealing with the appeal and executing, our instruction as far as appeal is concerned.
All right, thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. Much appreciated. Machini Motloung is the lawyer for Dr. Nandipha Magudumana, confirming they absolutely are planning to appeal today's judgment, which has, of course, decided that she remained behind bars. Of course, the judge saying he agreed, in fact, with the defence that this was not a deportation. It was, in fact, an extradition. However, he says because she consented to coming back to South Africa, she remains arrested. All right, so as we mentioned in that interview, police investigating the circumstances around the death of a senior police official in the Free State this afternoon.